Next week, the Joint Finance Committee will open public hearings on Governor Evers' proposed $73 billion two-year budget that would take state spending through June of 2021. So it's great to have a civil dialogue between two veteran members of the Joint Finance Committee, State Representative Jon Nygren, co-chair of that Finance Committee for a fourth term. My goodness.
Time flies when you're somewhat having fun.
He's a Republican from Marinette. He represents the 89th Assembly District, and State Senator Jon Erpenbach, a Democrat from West Point, represents the 27th District, and you're the longest-serving Senate member of the Joint.
I am, but that's actually
Senate
not,
Democrat.
That's not saying a lot. I think this is my second.
I think this will be your third.
Third budget, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it.
I don't nearly have the kind of office John does, which is why he actually likes to be the co-chair. It's not so much the work. It's the office. It's a nice office.
I visited some of my Senate colleagues' offices. They're pretty nice.
Yeah,
so,
but it's not like this.
Yeah, not like this.
All right, let's talk about
welcome to the People's House, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It's nice to be here.
Representative, last week at the Federalist Society, Speaker Voss said, we're going to start with our own budget, and we're going to work from the base budget. And if the governor vetoes it, he's going to get a budget that spends much less. But let's not get into Speaker Voss's comment so much as, what's the process? Is the governor's budget DOA?
Well, first of all, not to fact check the reporter or the person doing the interview, but actually the budget, I think you missed a digit. It's like $83 to $84 billion budget.
Thanks for the correction.
Not 73. So,
but it's a 10% upper in all fund spending.
Yeah,
so
significant.
I appreciate
it's about
the
8.
correction.
It's about 8%.
About 8.
Yeah.
In general fund? Well, okay, go back to the question.
Well, I guess I had to do that. Actually, after I got PolitiFact to change a half-true to true in the same day, so that's my new role.
WisconsinEye thanks you.
Jon Nygren, truth teller.
Yeah. There's pieces of it that aren't dead on arrival, but the governor had an opportunity here to. I mean, he campaigned as someone who's going to unite the two sides. work for the betterment of all Wisconsin. We've got more revenue than we've ever had, $1.8 billion in new revenues, surplus of nearly $700 million. In addition to that, we've got almost half a billion dollars in underspending in the current that has been going on over the last several years. That is spendable as well. So nearly $3 billion in spendable resources. Yet that's not enough. We need to raise taxes. So that, as well as the many things that my speaker and others have called a liberal wish list, makes it very difficult to start with the governor's budget.
Quick follow-up. What aspect of Governor Evers' budget most troubles you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a number of them. I would think, we're never going to be in favor of raising taxes. That's just simple. Especially when we don't need to. I mean, I think you could have a conversation, as Republicans have in the past, about perhaps maybe targeting dollars to certain things like transportation. But to raise taxes on manufacturers, farmers, et cetera, when we don't need to, doesn't make sense. In addition to, Medicaid expansion of welfare in the state when our economy is flying high, I think those are probably the two most troubling things to me.
Senator, whether the budget's increasing over 2 years by 8% or 10%, it's still a big increase, and it would draw down the surplus. The structural deficit would be 832, according to the budget in brief. Yet you're a fan of Governor Evers' budget?
There's a lot of things in the budget I do like, actually.
Does it spend too much, John?
No, but I think it spends enough money in the right places. K-12 education, $1.4 million. I think transportation. John and I have talked about transportation before. We have to do something. Our roads are falling apart. We need to take care of our bridges. Our ports need to be updated and so on. But what Governor Evers did, he did the right thing. He got elected, he went around the state, he held listening sessions, they had working groups, and that's how he put together this budget. He campaigned on the idea that K-12 education is going to come first. He campaigned on the idea of putting scientists back in the DNR and so on and so forth. So it wasn't so much the governor's opportunity to work with the Republicans on the budget. This is Governor Evers' budget. Now the process to work together starts now when finance takes the budget up, and hopefully We just don't throw out the governor's budget because he got elected. The Republican majority got elected. And I think what people are telling us is it worked together. So if you start from a base budget on everything, which I hope we don't do, that's not even giving the governor's budget a chance to basically, you know, get out to the public and say, okay, this is what he wants to do. What do you think? We disagree, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. But in the meantime, when this is all going on, I do hope the administration and the Republican leadership do take the time to sit down and try and hash things out behind the scenes.
I would hope for that as well. Actually, I know the Speaker and the Majority Leader have offered to meet with the Governor weekly, and to this point, he's rejected that. That was something that they did with Governor Walker. As I'm sure you've seen over the years, they didn't always agree, but those meetings at least got them to a point of understanding where each other's coming from. Without those type of conversations happening currently, I even asked the DOA Secretary, Brennan, who should we be negotiating with? And there's not a clear understanding right now. So those meetings need to take place if there's any hope of us finding common ground on a budget.
I asked him what he didn't like about the budget. What do you most like about your governor's budget?
K-12 funding.
K-12 funding.
To me, that's the most important thing in the $600 million going to special needs. We are at about 25% right now. I think we've fallen below that in funding. It's a federal mandate, and the feds really don't do anything for us on it, so it's up to the state to do it. And when the state doesn't do it, local school districts have to cut from one program to pay for another program, and that's just not the way it should be done. So $600 million gets us up to around 30% funding in the first year, and I think 60% funding in the second year, which is where it should be. And then just the overall dollar amount going to K-12 education is extremely important. And again, it shouldn't be a surprise, because Tony Evers' campaign, that's about all he talked about, was making sure that K-12 is funded properly and take relief away from the school boards to try and cut to put things together. And just to put this amount of money in perspective, I think it was over the past, 4 or 6 years or whatever it was, local school districts, just for operating costs, have raised about $1.4 billion on their own.
Yeah.
So it's not like
raise their property
right.
tax.
So in other words, it's not like the idea of schools have enough money they don't need anymore. They actually really do. And then transportation. If it's not going to be this, then what's it going to be? Because again, Governor Walker talked about being open for business, but our roads were falling apart. And it's not a partisan issue. I jokingly say you got your left lane, you got your right lane, we should be able to work together. But in the end, transportation has been neglected in this state for a while, and it's been patched together, no pun intended, and move money here, move money there. We need to identify a dependable funding stream for transportation, stick with it, and then work on the long-term problem. Well, so those two things I really do like.
I want to come back to transportation, but I want to ask you about the upper of, I think it's $1.5 billion in K-12, right, which includes a $600 million upper for special ed. The current budget did increase spending on K-12, although we can have a dispute over whether it was enough, and that was part of the campaign discussion. Yes. But the Mr. Evers' proposal up $1.5 billion, right, too much?
Well, I do. I think it's too much. As you just pointed out, $636 million last budget, largest single increase ever. In addition to that, some reforms that had been long overdue, something that was very important to the area that I represent, low revenue relief. But most significant change the school funding formula in probably 25 years. So John talks about the need in the school districts that have passed referendums, and that's accurate. But I would point out, actually, under Governor Doyle, more referendums were passed than under Governor Walker. And in addition to that, school districts are talking about not having enough resources, yet LFB did a study and found that the school balances, the general fund balances, have grown by nearly $500 million since Governor Walker took office. So that does not tell me that there's necessarily a poverty situation with our schools. Should we target our resources to get to special ed, to address issues like low revenue? You're gonna find that GOP could be supporters of education. 1.4, 1.5, probably a little bit too rich for our ability to pay.
Okay, now let's turn to transportation. John, the governor's budget, of course, 8-cent increase in the gas tax plus indexing.
Which is about 10 now, right?
LFB said that would take us from 30.9 to 40.5 cents per gallon. Repeal minimum markup, which your caucus spent a lot of time on last session. Do you think, well, let me ask about minimum markup. When the governor announced his budget, his aides told reporters, if you repeal minimum markup, it would more than negate the potential upper in the gas tax. It would lower gas taxes by about 14 cents a gallon. Do you believe that?
Do I believe it'll reduce it by 14 cents? I mean, that's what's been said. Fiscal Bureau, even when we proposed it last time, won't score it.
They will not score it.
They will not score it. So unless it's on paper, unless it's something we can truly count on, I think it's difficult to say that that'll happen. But I'm not going to be a hypocrite on this. It's something an idea we threw out there last time around. So I'm not against the concept. My bigger challenge with the governor's proposal on transportation deals with, even though we're increasing taxes by 10 cents a gallon and would be in this budget with indexing, we're still not solving all the problems with that significant increase. We're still, the Governor Walker's budget for county road aids was actually larger than what Governor Evers is proposing. Even under his budget with those tax increases and the fee increases on heavy trucks, still is the roads in the state will continue to deteriorate, not get better, continue to deteriorate. So if we're going to solve the problem, let's solve the problem.
Well, see, I don't know if you can. I've always looked at transportation. There's two issues. It needs money right now, and then long term. We've all heard the story. We're going to be collecting less overall in revenue simply because of good gas mileage, and all sorts of other things. So we have a short term, which we need the money now, and we have a long term, which is more we can't. That's when you have to get everybody together and look 10 years down the road and say, okay, how are we going to do this? When do we make the transition? How do we make the transition? But in the meantime, it needs cash now. And we haven't had an increase in the gas tax, I think, in 12 years here in the state. So more money has been moved into transportation, whether it's through bonding or whether it's through moving some GPR money in there or whatever the case may be. That doesn't fix it right now either. So, and getting back to minimum markup here for a sec, in the end, it's going to depend on the retailer. And we have to be, I've always supported the idea of the Unfair Sales Act simply because I don't want Walmart to sell gas as a lost leader to get people through the door, and then you have the smaller convenience stores in Belleville or New Glarus or wherever have to close their doors because people are going to drive 20 miles to save 10 cents a gallon or whatever it might be. So in the end, I know the governor's approach to this at 14 cents, that gas prices would go down 14 cents because basically that's what the markup is right now. But again, in the end, that's going to totally be up to the retailers, which is why Fiscal Bureau won't touch it.
And in addition to that, I mean, competitors are now allowed to meet their competition, and the retailers are. I mean, I live on the border of Michigan, so they were allowed to match retail prices in Michigan as well. So, and Michigan has a lower gas tax than us. So, I mean, all those things play into that.
But weren't they jumping up their gas tax like 20 cents a gallon or something like that?
Well, there is a proposal. I think it's more like 40. Okay. I would point out though, their Democrat governor only increasing spending in their budget by about 3%.
Wisconsin's better.
Minimum markup. Are you both your caucuses still interested? Do you consider it a serious option, John?
I can't speak for all 63 members.
How about you?
Well, as I said, it was part of the going up proposal last time around. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that it wouldn't be something that I would personally consider this time around. I do share some of the historic concerns that John does on how it affects the small retailer. Thankfully, one of the bigger concerns to me has always been pharmaceutical drugs, the mom and pop pharmacies throughout the state. We can't get in a situation where we're losing those small town pharmacies. So I think the idea of the big guy driving the little guy out of business is something that I do share. But I think from a gas standpoint is something we could do.
Where are you on the governor's proposal for an initial 8-cent bump followed by indexing? Is your caucus going to seriously look at that, or is it going to DOA, discard it?
Well, I think we'll seriously look at all transportation proposals as we have in the past. For us in the Assembly, it's always come down to willing partners. I think there's been more of a willingness to look at things such as tolling and more of a system that actually spread the cost to people from out of state who are driving in Wisconsin, and spread the cost out as far as possible, so it's not a burden on any one taxpayer in an unfair way. But yeah, I think we'll take a look at all options as we have in the past.
Senator, the Evers budget on transportation still the best potential plan out there?
Yeah, it's the only plan out there right now.
Right now.
And it depends on what the majority party comes back with. And to John's credit and Robin Voss's credit, they've been more open in trying to put together a transportation package that actually did increase revenue because they know we need it. Yes. It's been the Senate Republicans, and Scott Fitzgerald, the majority leader, has his hands full in that caucus in trying to get a transportation budget passed that's going to increase revenue, and because we need to. Now, on the issue of tolling, I think some of the folks on my side of the aisle, the problem with tolling has always been, okay, we can put the tolls in. First of all, it's going to take a long time to do it, to get them to see any sort of revenue, and then nothing's going to stop a governor down the road from selling the tolling rights. And all of a sudden, we don't own the tolls anymore.
Well, one quick follow-up, last question on transportation. What are you hearing from our trucking industry on the 27% increase in fees that's in the governor's budget? Is that a non-starter?
I haven't heard specifically. I mean, I represent the Green Bay area. Schneider National is headquartered there. I haven't heard specifically from them. I know where they were last time around when there was discussions about a heavy truck fee. I'm pretty sure they're going to be against. I mean, when it comes to raising any type of revenues, it always, don't tax me, don't tax the tax man behind the tree. I mean, nobody wants to pay. The question comes down to how can we direct this resources to get to the problems that we have today. I would suggest that even though revenues will continue to decline with more fuel-efficient cars, that the real problem is we have this short-term problem in the fact that we've had to rebuild the Zoo Interchange, Marquette Interchange, and all those projects in southeast Wisconsin that are generational projects that are almost near completion. So once we get to that point where they're complete, are we going to need the revenue in the future? And I'm not 100% sure that 10 cents isn't too much.
I hear both of you are more hopeful that there will be a transportation funding long-term solution in this budget than you were last cycle.
I don't know about long-term. If we can do it, awesome. That'd be great. I think short-term, absolutely. Now, when I talk short-term, I'm talking 10 years or less.
Okay.
But long-term, that would be wonderful. Assuming, obviously, the governor signs off on it, that'd be great.
Okay. The governor had three major campaign issues. We talked about K-12 funding. We now talked about transportation. Expansion of Medicaid, your Republicans say no way, but this is a critical priority for your Democrats. Why is it so important? The 82,000 that the governor's budget said it would pick up, and the 169 million in federal aid it would free up?
Right. Well, here's why. It's been important for Democrats for a long time, and it always will be. There is a segment of our society, if you're making $8 an hour, Steve, you don't qualify for Badger Care. That's true. And there are people out there making $8 an hour. There are also people out there, families out there making $12 or $13 an hour who don't qualify for Badger Care. And they're falling through the cracks, and they shouldn't be. It's simply because of the Affordable Care Act, but at the same time, Wisconsin has not done enough to really try and implement the Affordable Care Act in this state and kind of make it our own. We passed up our own exchange. We said no to a lot of things, we being the governor, Walker at that point in time. Those people have to have health care. They have to have coverage, they have to have access to something they can afford, and they have to have access to good quality care. We have good quality care in this state. It's a matter of access. And the idea that the Affordable Care Act is now, is it 9 years old or 10 years old? I think they just had a birthday.
I think OB voted for it. He was in the chair, I think, in 10.
Okay, so here's the deal. The original reason to not take it was you don't want to enable people to depend on the government. Okay, I get that philosophical argument. The other reason was, well, we can't take that money because it's not going to be there next year. It's been there for 10 years, and we have lost out on over $1 billion now. And the idea that we aren't going to take that money because we have to expand Badger Care and cover people up to 137% of poverty level or whatever it is, to me is absolutely wrong. So in the meantime, we're leaving all of that money out there. So what the governor does is he expands Medicaid. We take the expansion in the Medicaid program, and he doesn't take that money and spend it elsewhere. He keeps every single penny in healthcare and healthcare related items within his budget. So I understand and respect where they're coming from on. I think out of all of the things that they're wrong on, this is what they're wrong on the most.
That's most wrong on.
Yeah.
Well, okay. John, it's just not going to be a part of. It's just not going to be a part of a GOP budget.
No, it's not. And let's just be clear. Republicans are never going to support an expansion of welfare, especially in an environment.
It's not welfare. It's health care. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's health care.
Historically, it was a welfare program. I mean, that's how it was started. That's how it was intended. It's intended for people in poverty. So we're not going to support that, especially in an environment where the economy is doing very well. There's hundreds of thousands of jobs available. There are the opportunity to get people into the world of work where they get employment-supported health care, I think is great. Now, are there challenges? Things such as addiction and other type of mental health. Should we target our dollars towards that? Yes, I think we should, because my goal in doing that would be to help people with addictions, help people with mental health issues, other health-related issues get into the world of work so that they will be not dependent on government, but self-sustaining long-term. I mean, I think those are things that we can support, but just overall expansion, no.
So John mentions poverty. Somebody making $9 an hour doesn't qualify for Badger Care. I would consider that $9 an hour poverty, even though it's not the federal 100% of poverty. That's basically minimum wage. So a family of 4 making $14,000, $15,000, $18,000 a year, and they don't qualify for something, that's poverty. It's expensive to live in this state. You know, it's not cheap to pay
Cutting
rent.
taxes with us?
Yeah, no, it's not. I'm just
We're
talking
going to
about
taxes next.
I'm just talking about your basic trying to get to work, trying to pay the rent, trying to buy the food, all of that stuff. And so the idea that someone, and I'm not going to put words in John's mouth, but the idea that okay, it's a program designed for people living in poverty. $9 an hour is poverty. It doesn't get a lot poorer than that here in the state. Yet they don't qualify for Badger Care because we're not taking the expansion of Medicaid. And to me, that's just ridiculous. And it's not a welfare program. It's insurance, period, flat out. It's giving people access to insurance they can afford to live with, and secondly, giving them access to good quality care. That's not a welfare thing. That's something that we should all strive to do for people in this state.
New subject, the tax code changes in the governor's budget. They're historical in scope. In terms of the middle class income tax cut, raising the earned income tax credit, expanding the homestead tax credit, other changes, those tax code changes that the governor wants, $951 million. But when you look at the increases, you have limiting capital gains, $505 million, limiting the manufacturing tax credit, $516 million, conforming to federal tax code changes, that's more than $300 million, $41 million by taxing e-cigarettes. The uppers are $150, and the tax cuts are $500. Is that a good exchange?
I think so.
Overall?
Yeah, I do. And let's take man and ag, for example. First of all, agriculture is exempt on that. Secondly, it's the manufacturers. And the idea that that program was put in place to create jobs, it really truly hasn't worked if you take a look at the numbers. There's actually $15,000 or 15,000 jobs in manufacturing created 3 years before this program. There's like 3 or 6,000 jobs created after the program. And the idea, and this is a Democratic talking point, but it's true. There are like 30 people splitting $16 million or $30 million.
I've seen those
on
fiscal
the top.
bureau printouts.
And it's true. And you can take that same amount of money and you can have a positive effect on so many more people. And so the idea if we're going to be cutting taxes here in the state, it really does need to be aimed at the middle class and the majority of the people who actually live here in this state. And that's what Governor Evers does with everything you listed off.
The senator just defended the tax code fairness argument in the governor's budget. Your response?
Well, first of all, the manufacturing ag tax credit, the Democrat talking point, because it is, that 30 people, I would point out that I believe it's 87% of the people that actually qualify for the manufacturing ag tax credit are under 1 million. So you got to use both sides of that equation, not just the one side. And just remember who those people are. Those people are the ones that are employing your constituents and mine throughout the state, that are growing jobs, that are growing our economy. And even on the manufacturing and agriculture standpoint, the Democrats want to point out that they've now exempted. They figured out that was bad policy. They want to now exempt agriculture. But 25% of manufacturers in the state actually do business with agricultural products. So I mean, it would still affect farmers at a time when they're hurting. I don't even know how to underscore how bad the agricultural situation is in our country. It's mostly a federal issue, but it's something I think we all need to get behind to be able to solve. And then on the middle class tax cut side, you know what? We had an opportunity here. We actually put something forward that
put it on Mr. Evers' desk.
We put it on his desk. That was actually very consistent with what he campaigned on. The only difference is we believe when the economy is doing well, when our resources are higher than they've ever been before, why do we need to raise a tax on someone else that can jeopardize the growth that we've seen over the last several years when we can do it and live within our means?
But okay, so the way I look at the governor's budget is really kind of simple. It's not raising over here to pay for over here. It's leveling the playing field. It's making it a little more fair in this state, which tells you through Democrats' eyes how skewed things have been when it comes to tax breaks over the course of the past 8 years here in this state. It's skewed one way. And in our opinion, it's skewed away from the middle class of people who really truly do need the tax breaks. So to me, it's more of an adjustment, leveling the playing field, making our taxing structure system a little more fair here in the state.
Well, John, will the
Which John?
representative?
Yeah, this guy.
John N. Will the budget that your team drafts, will it include another middle income tax cut?
We haven't had those conversations yet, but obviously we've shown support in both houses to do it. So I don't believe that we're going to back away from that. But I mean, the senator, he talks about fairness and the effect on the middle class. Well, there was an opportunity to reduce taxes for the middle class. The governor decided that if he couldn't have it his way, he wasn't going to have it at all.
No, it was more a matter of it wasn't really paid for.
Well,
yet you're okay with a $1.7 billion structural deficit rolling into next budget.
No, we're talking about the tax plan.
But it's the same, John.
New subject, because we're running out of time. Decriminalize possession of up to 30 grams of marijuana. Why is that a good change, Senator?
There are people sitting in jails and prisons right now with marijuana-related offenses. Some of them very, very serious and probably should be there because you're talking about moving hundreds of pounds of marijuana at the same time. There are people there because they're addicted-related type of issues. In marijuana, in studies that you take a look at, whether you're talking about medicinal purposes or even full legalization, which is what the governor is talking about eventually. The idea for medicinal purposes, where in every single state where marijuana is legal for medicinal purposes, opioid abuse has come down, for example. And so the idea that a lot of other states, I think we're approaching 30 states now, and the District of Columbia, which either medicinal or full legalization have legalized it. It's just time we take another look at how we have, first of all, our marijuana laws in this state, and then secondly, at the very least, take a look at medicinal making it legal for medicinal purposes.
The 30-gram provision, non-starter in your caucus and with you, sir?
Let me just say, start with 30 grams.
Yes.
My understanding is that's like potentially 25, 30, 40 joints. I mean, it's not a small amount. I mean, that's a lot. Do I think people should be ending up in jail based on what they're doing in their basement by them, with their family and their friends? I think that's a reasonable conversation. Yet I reached out to district attorneys in the counties that I represent and said, okay, show me what is happening what is real life. And almost all the cases involving marijuana are involving other type of crimes, more serious drugs, driving while intoxicated or under the influence, those type of things. People aren't going to jail in 99.9% of the situations based on a simple possession. Medicinal, I think we could have a conversation.
Is there a way to thread that needle?
On the 30
on medicinal
grams piece?
No, medicinal. Apart from the 30-gram argument.
I think you've heard the speaker's comments on him. He's been supportive. I'm skeptical because the way it's been drafted in the past, I mean, you name it as far as a condition under the condition that would qualify for it, that the number of people that would be available for the card, and I live on the border of Michigan. Michigan had medicinal. The health care people I talked to said, don't do it. It's a much bigger problem than you realize. But if it was targeted towards, end of life, people with cancer-related, nausea and other pains, I mean, I think there's a way to get there, but it's very complicated. Devil's in the details.
It is, and I agree, but I don't think it's as complicated, I think, as some of us make it out to be. You have to look at what the alternative is, and the alternative is bag fulls of legally prescribed pills that get you addicted. And I don't think anybody wants that to happen either. So the idea, the list of what would qualify comes from the advocates, comes from a vet with post-traumatic stress syndromes, comes from cancer survivors, it comes with somebody with glaucoma, it comes with somebody who's dealing with MS. That's where that's coming from. And again, it's a situation where, and I do think there's a lot more discussion now, bipartisan discussion on this issue than there was even 2 years ago. So to me, that's really moving the needle on this, and I would not be surprised if we have it legalized for medicinal purposes in a pretty short period of time here.
My biggest concern with this is, my understanding, at least in Wisconsin, I know other states have done it, but this would be the first time that we'd be approving a prescription drug without the CDC or the FDA rule, having any type of studies on it. I mean, that to me is concerning. It opens up a huge Pandora's box for other problems. So those are just a few of the concerns that I have with the whole proposal.
Okay, I've got two more issues because we're really almost out of time. And the governor's proposal to freeze the choice program and end the deduction for tuition. Excuse me. Non-starters, not going to part of your budget?
Non-starters.
Quick response on that?
We should obviously be taking a look at that, and in addition to allowing districts to put on their property tax bill exactly how much money is going out of that local school district and going to the choice program. Okay. So yeah, transparency is a good thing, and absolutely we need to have the discussion about the choice program because it was never designed to be like it is today. Okay. Never was.
And then final subject, John, the governor's proposal, nonpartisan way to redistrict reapportionment, is that coming out of the budget?
That won't be in the budget.
That will not be in the budget.
It'll be in a Democratic budget amendment.
It'll be in a Democratic
budget amendment. We'll put it back in an amendment if it's not there. We have to have a pretty serious discussion about this, and Democrats dropped the ball when we had the majority. We didn't make the change when we should have. But if you take a look at the isolationism that's going on in this state and the divide that we have in this state, you can draw a direct line to redistricting because you're packing Republicans, you're packing Democrats, and none of us are getting along. So as a result, when you have an election, for example, in a very partisan district, yes, you're going to get the extreme on both sides coming out of the primary. And they're expected to come down here and work with everybody, and that's not happening right now.
Okay, 3 months from now, if you Democrats don't like the Republican budget, would you, John E., ask the governor to veto the whole entire thing?
It depends on, that's hard to say.
Okay.
It depends on how it looks.
And if that happened, Speaker Voss said the second budget would spend much less.
Well, then it would be another veto. I mean, where does that get us,
How does
Steve?
that move the pile?
Well, I think there is an opportunity here. I mean, we already talked about the missed opportunities to this point, and they're great. I would suggest part of the conversation I had stressed early, it's time to get the key players in the room having a conversation, and deal with the issues that are before us as a state. That's what the governor campaigned on. That's what I came here for. I'm pretty sure that's what you came here for. It's time to do that.
See, and I think we can. And that's why we talked about it at the beginning of the show, the idea that I think the administration wants to sit down and work with the majority party and the minority party as well to try and really craft a budget together. It's not so much a missed opportunity, as I said at the top of the show. This is Tony Evers' budget. Scott Walker had his budget. And now this is going to be the legislature's budget, the majority party in the legislature. So I firmly expect talks to go on while the budget process goes on in both houses.
Well, this is a great civil dialogue, and the debate begins formally next week with public hearings. I want to thank
All right, man. Good to see you. Yep.
Finance Co-Chairman John Nygren.
Steve. Just a member. I'm just a member of the
Okay,
committee.
But you're the senior Democratic member on the Joint Finance Committee.
Senior.
Yeah.
Thank you. We look, WisconsinEye will be covering the entire process. Thank you very much.
Sure, Steve.
Thanks.